and the shuttle on its back.
Thank you so much for having me in. I've never done it like this, but I'm really honored to see you in such a fantastic historical room. I mean, I counted the days the other day, almost 48 years exactly.
It will be 48 years.
But you're not going quietly into retirement. Seems like your last week is pretty busy.
We were working about 1 o'clock this morning. Worked all weekend, all the week before, weekend before and the week before that to finish up the appropriations bills. At one point when, well, if we put 50 billion more here, another 100 billion, I said, wait a minute, just listen to what you're saying. Think of the amounts of money you're talking about. And we wrapped it up. We negotiated $1.7 trillion. When I walked in here as a new senator, the concept of $1 billion was, you know, somebody grew up in Montpelier, amazed. But I was able to use all the things I've learned being here. That is, work with both Republicans and Democrats. And most people, you can work things out.
Another piece of current events, the January 6th report was released today. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I saw the headlines on it reporting. I'm anxious to read at least the basic report. It goes on hundreds of pages of transcripts, but the basic report. I'm glad we have an Attorney General like Merrick Garland. He's impeccably honest, former Courts of Appeals judge, and whatever he does is going to be very difficult because it's not an easy decision to make, unprecedented decisions. But I think we'll be able to appreciate and support his decision. But I think I look at some of the people who testified before that committee, some who flat out lied, others who said they were such great Americans, they're ready to testify, and then took the Fifth Amendment all the way through because their lawyer probably told them what you did was criminal. If you want to admit it under oath, go ahead, but you're going to go to jail.
So how about one other question about current events? Is there any chance for the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Act? Is that going to pass?
I hope it does. And people normally say, well, you know, electoral count, that's really important to small state, 3 electoral votes. I said, not anymore. That worked very well when you were at a time when we can tell you how our election came. It would take 3 days for the mail to get to you. Now it all happens simultaneously. And I saw Hillary Clinton win by several million votes, but lose in the Electoral College. And very close with President Biden and former President Trump, but President Biden had millions more votes. Let's just count the votes.
Okay. So one thing, I was checking back over your career a little bit, and when you first got here, at the beginning of your book, you seemed to be, you were 33 years old, there seemed to be a lot of gee whiz in that kid from Montpelier.
Boy, there was. I had walked in here. I used to walk around these halls when I was a student at Georgetown Law School, and I'd say, wow, look at that. There's this assistant deputy secretary, so-and-so. Oh, there's a real senator. And then suddenly, a few years later, I'm walking through the halls.
Well, and one of the things I noticed, when you took office, James Eastland was the pro tem. And even his Senate biography describes him as a segregationist and an opponent of civil rights.
Yep.
I mean, 48 years later, you couldn't be more different than that. But correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't the Senate at the time known as being a much more collegial place than it is now?
It was far more collegial. If I could mention Jim Eastland, he came up to me my first day and he said, "Boy, how old are you?" I didn't want to say 33 or 34 and a half. I said, "I'll be 35 next year. Anybody ever tell you too young?" And I said, "Yeah, my opponent for one." He thought, well, okay. His test was to see if I'd back down. And we did find things we could agree on some of the judicial matters, some things that affected Vermont. But we obviously disagreed on segregation. I mean, I introduced the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That's the way I feel. And most have changed since then. I worry that they start changing back. The era of segregation always seemed to a Vermonter as, why is this? And then I came down here and saw some of the older senior senators who regretted segregation was ending. They were wrong.
So how does that square, that collegiality from almost 50 years ago with what we're seeing now in this era of hyperpartisanship?
It's a good question. I think then most of them knew that there were basic things the Senate should do, basic things the country needed, and we should find a way to come together on. Now, there are too many people who think, what can I say that'll get me on the evening news or get me a soundbite or get me on this Twitter account or something else? They don't care about the country. They care about their political ambitions. I sometimes wonder, you got a dozen of them over there making these tweets are all running for president someday. I don't know if they realize only one person can be the nominee at a time. But it's more, what can I do that helps me, helps my political ambitions, helps my appearance, not what can I do that helps the country. Now, we finished last night weeks of negotiation on a bill that will fund the country for the next year. I never called a press conference during that time, nor did the other senators in there. We just tried to work it out. There is so much legislation that doesn't get passed today that should, because everybody's running out trying to get their spin on it and say, see, I'm the only one who knows what I'm doing. Well, you're not.
Is there any way to get back to that collegiality? And I think of Congress, the Senate, the House, and the nation as a whole. Is there any way to get back to that?
I'm very worried. If we don't get back to it, this country is going to be severely damaged. We're the wealthiest, most powerful nation on earth. And we have over 300 million Americans. We have a responsibility to the Americans. We have a responsibility to the rest of the world. We're not carrying it out doing that way. It's like if you politicize the Supreme Court, the country is hurt. If you have a president who doesn't understand, whether Republican or Democrat, that there are certain norms they must follow, the country's hurt. And what happens in the Congress, when people feel they and they alone can make the decisions for the country, that hurts us all.
But do you see a path on how to return to get away from that?
I think leaders have got to sit down with their members and say, okay, why don't we take a couple positions where we have a strong Democratic or a strong Republican value. Let's set aside a filibuster. Let's go on the floor and debate it and amend it one way or the other. But don't spend every single issue. Only I have the answer. It doesn't work. We have to break through the filibuster in almost every federal judge. That's wrong.
After your almost 48 years in the Senate, what are you most proud of? I mean, and I think of that, I asked that question for your role in the United States, in the world, and for Vermont.
I think I kept my Vermont values and my integrity. I cast over 17,000 votes. I'm sure I could go back and look at them and say, what was I thinking? But when I cast them, I thought I was doing the right thing. I mean, I've been here only 3 months as the junior most member of the Senate. We had a vote whether we'd stop the Vietnam War or not. We'd had members who criticized the war, but no Vermonter had ever voted to stop the war, stop the funding. I voted that way. We had 5 votes in a row. Each one, the funding for the war in Vietnam was defeated by 1 vote. You can imagine the pressure I was getting. I was told that I'd never be reelected. I thought, that's the case. It's worth it. It's worth it to do it for that vote. But not enough people are doing that. Well, let's take a poll on this. Take a poll, use your integrity. And as a result, I've been able to do a lot for Vermont. I mean, look at Lake Champlain, the almost doubling of the Vermont National Forest, starting organic food as a Vermont idea is now a $50, $60 billion industry. But then worldwide, I think the advances we've made in putting the war behind us in Vietnam, at least the Vietnamese give me a lot of the credit for that, because I've worked with Republican and Democratic presidents, brought the Leahy War Victims Fund there, brought groups of senators, Republicans and Democrats alike, to see what we're doing, the dangers of landmines, Agent Orange. Marcel's gone into the hospitals and seen the damages caused by this, and we made it better. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of it. I think when I go into schools and they call me Uncle Leahy, pure affection. Their parliament meets to honor me for what I've done for them, but they're the ones that suffered from the war. And I'll never forget, first time I brought the Leahy War Victims Fund, a man who'd been crawling on the floor, on the ground for years, and they asked me to pick him up and put him in the wheelchair. He'd been just staring at me all the time. And I thought, here I am, well over 6 feet tall, over 200 pounds. This little guy must be looking at me like, I hate you. I picked him up, put him in the wheelchair, started to get up, he grabbed my shirt, he pulled me down, he kissed me. That tells you something. Same thing happened to John Glenn, who was with me. John was not an emotional guy. He had tears coming down his face. But it says if you work at things, you can accomplish something, you can make a difference in people's lives. You're one of 100. So, it's an honor to be one of 100 to serve here. And I've served over 400 senators since I've been here. Some use it simply for their own aggrandizement, their own, what they can get out of it. Others care for what they do for the country, their states, for the world. I try to be in that latter category.
And it's a related question, but what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
I'd be happy to be remembered as a Vermonter because, and that's where we're going back to. But I want the legacy that I kept my word. I saw where problems are, and I stuck to them. I keep in my office a picture I took at a refugee camp. I've had it there for decades, right above my desk. A lot of these things are being moved out right now, but it's a man in a refugee camp, and he's just looking at me straight on. I'd gotten his permission to photograph him. What I read in his face is, you don't know me. You can't speak my language. I can never do anything to help you. What do you do to help people like me? And every day I've looked at that conscience picture and thought, how do I make life better for Vermonters, for our country, but for the rest of the world.
And for the rest of the world, or people who aren't from Vermont, define Vermonter for me.
Well, it's changed throughout my lifetime. I mean, when I first ran, we were very much a Republican state. I was told that I was 34, Catholic, Democrat. I could have the nomination as worthless. I could never win. But we changed. We've become more diverse, and that's better for Vermont. But what we have to do now is not rely just on rhetoric, but do the hard work to create real jobs, housing, where people can stay in Vermont. There's so many people, young people love Vermont, but they need the jobs, the housing, and the rest to stay there. I look at some of these companies that have come into Vermont, like Beta. They've done a lot. They've created big jobs, good jobs, and we should have more of that. But we've also got to strengthen our educational base so they can do that. And frankly, as grandson of immigrants, welcome immigrants. They come new ideas and new talents.
I'd like a little bit more about the change of Vermont from one of the most Republican states in the country to arguably the most liberal. That started a little bit before you were elected to the Senate, with the Governor Hoff in '62, and Tom Salmon was elected in '72, if I remember correctly. But you have come to define that. I mean,
Governor Hoff was the first person I was able to vote for. And I remember my parents, when President Kennedy ran, I wasn't old enough to vote. They voted for him, but they said, we're going to be heartbroken because Irish Catholic, he'll never win. And of course he did, and they were overjoyed. Phil Hoff I voted for. I admired the fact that he said everything doesn't have to be done the way it was before. He was bringing new ideas, fresh ideas, talented people in his administration. I started off at his law firm, and then called me up on a Friday and said, been a real problem in the state's attorney's office. He's leaving on Monday. I want you to be sworn in as state's attorney. I said, William. And I did. I said, I'll take it for 1 year. I stayed for 8. I enjoyed it so. But I also saw changes coming, and I pushed for those changes and making sure people could be heard.
After 48 years in the Senate, what would you change if you could?
I'd like to have us go back to the days when senators spent more time with each other and both parties and seek common ground. Certainly there are going to be some things where we disagree. Fine, do so. But seek common ground on most things. When I was first here, I saw how that could be done in what we call codels, congressional delegation. I've been here about 2 or 3 months. Senator Hubert Humphrey came up to me and said, Patrick, I got to go to Moscow to see Brezhnev. I want you and Marcel to come with me. You know how much the National Committee helped out on my election? They sent me $1,000. And we were flat broke. I blurted out, what's the airfare to Moscow? He said, no, we're going to take Jerry's plane. I said, Jerry who? He says, Jerry Ford, he's the president. Don't you read the papers? But then I saw the brilliance of Hubert Humphrey. This big plane. I was the junior most person, so we sat in the back, which was fine. Here's Hubert Humphrey, and his co-leader was Hugh Scott, the Republican leader of the Senate. They had an equal number of Republicans and Democrats across the political spectrum. It's a long flight. We'd sit around the conference room in the plane and talk, tell stories. What's it like in your state? Oh, we had this in our state. And you find common ground. We came back with some significant pieces of legislation passed with strong bipartisan support. A lot of it came from that flight. And so I've done the same thing. for example, when I became chair of the Agriculture Committee, I said, why don't we have a Codel here in this country? And so I take key Republicans, key Democrats, and we flew to each other's state. If we're in a Republican state, I'd have the Republican senator chair the meeting. Democratic state, I'd have the Democratic senator. And we passed the 5-year farm bill in the least amount of time it ever had been after that. But people got to know each other. I have, with my seniority, I've got a room upstairs with a balcony outside, chairs, tables overlooking the mall. In the evening session, I'll invite, especially warm weather, I'll invite senators down there, both parties, just to sit and talk.
Is it working? I mean, are you helping?
Yes. I'll give you a couple examples. We wanted to update the Violence Against Women Act. I was joined by a conservative Republican, Mike Crapo, because we started talking about battered women. He told about the Native Americans he had visited, and under the law, there's no way they could go after their attackers. He promised he'd help them. We worked together. We also talked to people about the fact that runaway kids are often sought out by sexual predators. For the first time ever, we put in a section on that. And the LGBTQ community, all of this was done. But it was meeting after meeting like that, not the press conference versus press conference versus press conference, but actually working it out to get it done. I was very happy with that. I remember the president at the time asking me, how did you get that done? And I told him, he said, I ought to come by and join, what do you call those? I said, I call them prayer hour and holy water. And you have any kind of holy water you want.
Follow sort of related questions to something I asked you before, but how do you think you have changed the world? And same question about Vermont. Well,
I've changed the world by one thing, the Leahy law that passed first here in the United States, is followed by so many other countries banning the export of landmines. Now you have rogue countries like Russia, where Putin's a war criminal. They've used it, but it's helped around the world. And the Leahy War Victims Fund has helped, well, war victims around the world, countries big and small. I've had thousands of letters, people, now I can walk again. I'm no longer crawling on the ground. I have prosthetic. Thank you. So those things, I think, have made a big difference. And then I go in Vermont, and I talk to people, you know, we listened to what you said. We saw some of the legislation passed, helped us get money for our children to go to college. Let me tell you what they're doing. I had a young woman came up to me in the airplane, Marcel, and I thought she was probably in her 20s. She said, you nominated me to West Point. And I said, really? And I said, and you stayed in the military? Yes. She said, I'm in Hawaii now with the Corps of Engineers. Well, the colonel hands me her card. You know, I thought she might possibly be a lieutenant. The colonel is the head of the Corps of Engineers in Hawaii, which is a huge state because of all the water projects and everything else they do. That made me feel kind of good. The interns we've had here, I go through all the list of Vermonters who've been interns, and they tell me how they're doing. Now that I'm chief of surgery here, now that I'm in the Peace Corps, now that I'm about to be named ambassador, or I'm doing this with a rescue organization, and it just, you think, you know, sometimes you set the example, they'll follow it.
Another related question to the theme we're talking about. What are you most proud of? Again, in the U.S., the world, and Vermont.
Oh, there are so many things I'm proud of. I'm proud to be able to show that I could do this without having to change my own standards, my own feelings, whether sometimes popular and sometimes not. There's a Irish member of Parliament from the 19th century who talked about how he owes his basically work and energies and all for his constituents, but his conscience he keeps to himself. He owes that to nobody else. And I followed that. I think it's important. I think I've done that. But after I announced my retirement a year ago, we've just been flooded with letters. You helped me on this, or you gave me advice to do this. I came from a prominent Republican family. You hired me as an intern, and you said it's based on my qualities. And I want you to know what I'm doing now. I mean, growing up in Montpelier, I saw my parents help people. My parents weren't wealthy, but I remember as a child, they'd go to the grocery store, we'd wait in the car as they went into a rundown house, drop off a couple of bags of grocery, shake hands and leave. I can drop off much bigger bags of groceries. And that, going to refugee camps, going elsewhere, but also coming in the United States after there's been a disaster, whether in Vermont or anywhere else, and saying, I'll help you. And knowing I can because of my position. I remember when we had Irene, I'm flying around the state with the governor and Mike Doobie, who's the adjutant general. A small helicopter. We actually opened one of the doors so I could take pictures out the side. I was on the phone with several senators during that time. They said, and these were Republicans, they said, when we had a disaster, naming what it was, you helped us out. Just tell me what you need, and I'll vote for it. And then going into the towns and seeing how people, from one man cleaning out somebody's store, I said, you live here? He said, nope, next town over. I wasn't hurt. He was. If I was hurt, I'd hope he'd come and help me. That says it all. I mean, you go on for a 20-page thing. That says it all. And that Vermont spirit is what I like.
What are your biggest regrets?
Oh, I think I can always look at things I wish I could have done more. I regret that I could not have had more time with children and grandchildren. I always regret when I'm not with Marcel. And it's probably the only time she gets something done when I'm not around. But, you know, I wrote the book primarily to show both good and bad things. I mean, you could do a whole lot. I regret that this country had January 6th because I worry about my children and grandchildren. They have a country like this.
Tell me about something fun you did in your 48 years in the Senate.
Well, I've had a lot of fun things. One was the Golden Knights were going to be up in Vermont with the National Guard. So they called me up, they said, would you like to parachute with us? And I said, great, I'd love to. Several people in my office said, we got mortgages, you know, what are you doing? So I go up we go out of the plane 2 miles up, and we free fall for the first mile, going 135 miles an hour, you know. It's wonderful. And then you pull the chute, dead silence, and down we come land precisely where we were. He said, wait a minute, now you spent about 15 minutes hooking me up. He goes, snap, snap. Okay, you're unhooked. I said, wait a minute. You mean you could have just done that and dropped me? Oh, Senator, I'd never do that. That'd be a bad career move. I said, for you or for me? Now, that was fun. And certainly some of the times with presidents who have been of both parties, just be around sitting and talking. That's a lot of fun.
One more policy question. You talked about one of your first votes, your Vietnam vote, very early on in your career. What do you think is going to be your last vote?
Well, I wish it'd be the Voting Rights Act, updated. Probably when the last will be funding for next year, the so-called omnibus. Be referred to as the Leahy bill on the floor. I just want it passed. I never thought I'd be writing a bill with $1,700,000,000,000 in it and balancing thousands of interests to make it work. When I first came here we didn't have anything that large, but to think I'd actually be doing something like that, guiding a bill like that, I would have said that's impossible.
So what are your plans for retirement?
Well, we're going back to Vermont full-time. We've got the home in Middlesex, you know where that is, on a dirt road, but we're also going to get an apartment. They're under construction now, down near the waterfront in Burlington, and the science center called Echo at the Marcel Leahy Center, as I call it. And we're going to be there. We can walk there. I'll have an office at the University of Vermont that they were kind enough to offer me. They have my archives. I can go over that. There will be scholars who will come in. And I can feel very free when they pull out something from 25 years ago from my daily journal. Well, what do you mean? This person was acting like an idiot and this person was doing the right thing. And I said, well, let me tell you about that. That I'm going to enjoy.
Any specific things you hope to accomplish in retirement?
Oh, yeah, I want to help the university on some of their reaching out to some of the rural areas, helping people get a higher education. And I will work on that. The Leahys came to Vermont about 1850. I was the first Leahy to get a college degree. My sister, the second one. And I see so many kids that didn't have that opportunity. I want to help people do it. And I think that will, along with some of the things I've gotten for Vermont, will bring in more high-tech and other businesses. I think that will help Vermont long after I'm gone.
Okay. Any final thoughts?
I never thought 48 years could go by so fast. I was wrapping up getting some things out of my archives here, pulling. Now, when was that picture being taken at the White House? Well, you were down meeting with President Ford, and then seeing another picture later on when King Hussein died, and I'm going over with President Clinton, President Bush, President Ford, President Carter, and I'm sitting. I don't believe this is happening in the conference room in the plane. They're calling each other by first name. I'm going, Mr. President. Oh, he calls by our first name. Thank you, Mr. President. But to think just to be there and be seeing history, but then I've seen history in so many ways. Much of it inspiring, meeting with some world leaders, Nobel Prize winners, scholars, musicians, and then you have something that is so discouraging, January 6th, where people never read the Constitution, according to what they think, where police officers defending the Capitol are murdered And they say, oh, well, they just got in the way. No. That worries me for my children and grandchildren.
Again, I asked you this before, but I'm going to ask it again. Where do you see the future going?
I think if things don't change, if people don't start thinking about the principles of this country and what's really in the Constitution, and giving everybody a chance, making sure everybody can vote, whether they vote for you or against you, the future will be bad. Now, we've gone through difficult times. We went through slavery. We went through segregation. Each time we sort of stepped forward, but I've never seen such a step backward as happened January 6th. And the motivation for it, that's got to change.
Okay. Can you show us around your office a little bit?
Sure.
Can you talk about Batman?
Oh, how could I forget? I'm sorry. How could I forget about Batman? Yes, tell us about Batman.
You've never seen me and Batman in the same room, have you? Sorry.
I'm sorry. I should have asked you that.
Well, Batman is kind of a, Montpelier has a children's library. It used to be in the basement of the big Kellogg Hubbard. I had my first library card there when I was 4. Wonderful librarian, Mrs. Holbrook, who encouraged me to read. By the end of 3rd grade, I'd read all of Dickens and Robert Louis Stevenson and all of that. And every single Batman comic, I'd be down there with my 10 cents to buy it at that time as soon as it came out. And I remember everything from them. I was talking to their publisher about something. They brought up Batman. They said something that he had never done. I said, no, in June of 1947, about the 5th page in, he did such and such. They said, yeah, that's nice. They go back and they pull out the archives. They said, my God, he's right. So he came back to me, trying to ask me more questions, and they were doing an archive or a 50-year anniversary. Would I write the introduction? So I did. And they published it. That got led to writing another Batman thing. And then they were doing an animated Batman where I do the voice, which they were able to do right in Burlington in a studio. And that was fun. And they said, we'll pay you a lot. And I said, well, give it to the children's library in Montpelier. One thing led to another, and they ended up in 5 movies. Again, every cent going to the children's library. And if you go in the big, new, beautiful library they have there now, you see up in the corner a little bat signal thanking me. But I do an awful lot of photography, and I just love seeing how they do the photography. I enjoyed being in it. They did ask when the Joker had a knife to my throat. They said, now act scared. I said, act? You scared the heck out of me. And one of the security agents said, I said, it's okay, it's nice plastic. But I liked it because it could help children read. And one of the most fascinating things I did on that, so Saturday morning, I'm down volunteering at reading hour, these 4, 5, 6-year-olds. Somebody hands me a note, and I said, I can't figure this out. Batman's enemies have their pictures here hidden in the library. I need help. I grabbed my cell phone. I said, you nearby, I need some help. Door bursts open. In walks Batman. We'd borrowed the suit from Warner Brothers, local actor. The children figured it all out for him. On the way out, he said, I want to thank you, children. Oh, with his deep voice, they said, you're welcome, Mr. Batman. Now that, I thought, I just come back from almost a month of every night, weekend, the Senate. I said, this makes it all worthwhile. Somebody said, what do you mean this makes it worthwhile? I said, don't ask, but it does. But, the point I try to make in giving the money to the library, learn to read. Tell children to read. Read anything. Just read. don't just watch TV screens. Don't just watch your iPhone or iPad or something. Read. And maybe it came easier to me because I was born blind in one eye, basically blind. But I love to read. I can think of all the times I just sit on the couch in Montpelier, my parents' home, just reading.
Great. Well, can you show us around here a little
Sure.
bit?
Sure. Now, a lot of the stuff is down off the wall.